All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asuk b'divrei Torah. Baruch na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Torah chavafinu fi amcha beit Yisrael v'nei yeh anachnu v'tzetzinu v'tzetzei amcha beit Yisrael kulan yodei shemecha v'lemdei Toratecha lishma Baruch atah Adonai hamlemei Torah le'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu Torato Baruch atah Adonai notenu Torah.
Amen.
I feel like this is brought to you by Laurel and Hardy Productions. I'm giving away my age by saying that.
You're giving away my size.
So last time we had a problem with the recording yesterday, and then we had load shedding. So we ended off, guys, on 7A3. And I just need to do a quick summary because we're missing the recording totally, is that obviously there's not a question that on the third and sixth year, when we give Maisa Ani, everybody's property that had declined below 200 zuz is eligible for Maisa Ani, up to 1,000 zuz at one single time. Okay? One of the reasons is because if you've only got Maisa Ani in the third and sixth year, you were eligible for quite a lot simply because it had to last you. And if you were bad at money management, I don't know what the sort of solution was there, but I think they were very careful. It's not like today. Where there is a question is if a person's value of their land is actually technically worth 200 zuz in its right price season in Nisan, where the true value of the land is not in the lower value part of their land, but they're sitting in Tishrei, they have no cash flow, and if they sold now because they were desperate for money, they would end up losing. They don't only lose because, how do we say this? Because they're selling at the decreased price, but because unfortunately people take advantage and make sure they're in desperate states and in order to, inverted commas, get a bargain, which is absolutely disgusting. So what we do is we say, look, the real value of the property is worth what it's worth in Nisan. Just like a jersey's real value is according to its function in winter. And if you're paying a half summer sale for a jersey, that's not its true value. So too, the prices of the property, or in this particular case, are worth what they're worth in the peak season of Nisan. And if you're selling it in Tishrei due to financial desperation, you are in a special circumstance given a compromise where you lent the shortfall to get you through to Nissan, so that when you do sell your property, you're going to get the most amount of value, which would be up to half the property's value, because the custom was that even though it would decrease up to half, it wouldn't decrease further than that. So that's where we got up to. And this is on 7B1. And after we dealt with that particular issue, we discussed that there seemed to be a little bit of a contradiction. Okay. So this is where the Brisa starts in 7B1. The Gemara now explains how Rabba's interpretation of the Brisa can be applied to resolve the contradiction posed by a buyer. Okay? So remember, a buyer had this thing of shall return, he shall return, and then that issue of he shall pay. So his interpretation of it had to do with the seasonal amount and seeing that the value of the land wasn't at the current value of the land and what it's worth. Okay. So what's the whole point of this stuff? The whole point of this stuff, in summary, is that we have to see that all of these upcoming dafs and some of the previous ones want to achieve a balance. What's that sort of balance? That sort of balance is trying to work out what is fair in terms of justice, how to obviously meter that out where it's tempered with chesed, and to keep good economic policy mixed with good relationships with one's neighbors. So one of the issues that's brought up is a case where we want to make sure that the damaged party can recover their money very, very quickly. And they can recover their money very quickly in a case where when the damager gives them land, they're able to sell that land offer. They're able to sell that land very, very quickly. And so they're given superior land so that the buyer can jump off at the opportunity for that land. Meaning that if you give somebody land from Bears Valley or Soweto or the Cape Flats, it's going to take them a little while to convince a buyer that it's safe and they don't want to be bullet holed to sell it. If you've got property in Bedfordview or Sandton, the reality is you can get rid of that property very quickly. So why is this done? This is done in order to ensure that the person that was damaged doesn't have to wait months for financial recovery. But it's got an implication that if you are making sure that the damaged party has restitution financially, what is going to happen as a result is very, very straightforward, is that the damager is going to sustain a loss at a certain point. And when are they going to? In the Tishrei area. Why? Because Tishrei, if they owe 100 zuz worth of money, they're going to have to probably sell, give that person double the amount of land that they would in the attractive price of Nissan. Okay? And the reason is that the damaged party can recover their money quickly. Okay? So where is it a loss? It's a loss to the damager. Now, why do we give a loss to the damager rather than the damaged party? Because who created the problem? The person not looking after the animal created the problem. So if they happen to have made a stupid mistake in a season that was, the property prices was high, okay, so then the damager would end up getting away with paying the least amount of land possible because the value of the land accrued was high. When they damaged in the wrong period of time where the land was depressed in price, you can't expect the damaged party to be told to wait 6 months before they can recover their loss. Again, it wasn't their fault. It was the other person that should have guarded their ox for not eating in the field of another and not trampling in the field of the other. So the hit is taken by the damager. But you have to meter that out with the relationship where while we're giving superior land, again, so that the person can turn it into cash and financially recover quickly. But you can pay with cash equivalent, okay? So if you've got cash, you're not going to sustain that land loss issue because the person then has got the land to recover and buy a new ox. If you've got bran or other sorts of material that the person can sell on the open market in this town or that town, then they can recover their cash relatively quickly. And again, here the damaged party is put to effort. Why is the damaged party put to effort? Because we're going to see later on about a carcass that lands in the pit, is that they're given the carcass and the other party, the damager, just pays the balance. So it's the damaged party that now has to also schlep to a certain extent. So they're doing a balance where both parties have to exert themselves. So it's not unfair. So how's the damaged party exerting themselves in this case? They have to go to the trouble of selling the land. It's not just the damager. It's not like we're making sure that the damager has a loss by selling it not in peak season. And it's not that, for example, the damaged party is the one that puts his hand behind his head and just relaxes. He's the one that actually has to convert the field and sell it. He's got to schlep now as well. So both of them are schlepping. The damager is losing a bit of property value if it happens to damage in the wrong season. And a damaged party is the one that has to exert himself to sell that land in order to recover his financial losses. And we're going to see that you can also sell grain or anything else that can be converted to cash. The bottom line here is it's not about land. It's about converting to cash quickly in order to recover your loss. And why do we say superior land? Because it's a heck of a lot easier to sell quickly and recover your cost when buyers would jump at the opportunity to buy land in Sandton compared to the Cape Flats. Okay? So that's what we're getting at here. But how are we combining this with good relationships with one's neighbor? Very, very simple. Say, Arthur brought up a good point to me yesterday when we were chatting, and I think that one or two other people did as well, is that what happens if, let's just say that the person takes equivalent of average or inferior land and takes more land than necessary because they've got money. The damaged party here was damaged, but they've got a lot of cash. So now the damager has lost money because he sold it out of season. And the principle was what? To make sure the damaged party recovers. But he's sitting on the land, okay? And then he's selling the land in peak season, so he's making a profit. Do you think those neighbors are ever going to get on after that? Guys, you think they're going to get on? The guy's going to be upset. It's one thing if his neighbor's poor and he sees the guy's poor and he says, all right, listen, you need to recover your costs. I damaged you, I'm sorry. If his neighbor's wealthy and he's poor, you think it doesn't happen? Always the guy that's poor without the insurance hits the Porsche. Always. That's how luck would have it. So what happens is he's sweating and paying now, losing his income because he had a lot on his mind. He was worried about money, and he hits his neighbor's property, and the neighbor doesn't only have property in that value where he's got a subtenant, for example. Say he doesn't live in Bears Valley, but he's got property in Bears Valley, property in Sandton, property in Cape Town, and he's rented out his property. And the lessee, the person that's rented from this big landlord, said somebody damaged one of your fields, and the owner of the actual property gets in touch with him, and the damaged party isn't economically strong and pays him. And instead of converting it to cash, he's sustained a 6 months loss by selling it at the depressed price, more land, and then the other person's taking their time, makes a profit, and then sells it at what? At the best possible price of the land. Do you think that's going to engender or foster any good relationships? I highly doubt it. So what the Torah wants to do here is create a balance between what's fair for the damager, the damaged, and foster good relationships within the ethical boundaries of making sure that people don't wangle out of payment or people don't take advantage of being paid. That's the essence of what we're dealing with here. Whilst taking into account complex economic factors, such as seasonal fluctuations, value of property, recovery of losses, property liens, acquisitions, etc. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Good. All right. And on this basis, we can go on. I just wanted to put a bit of background. I'm sure you guys all knew this, but some of the people that might be listening to the show aren't aware of sometimes the conversations I've had with you guys privately where you've actually made me think. And I must thank each of you for that because each of you has put in a huge amount of effort this week in terms of prep. And it really makes life a hell of a lot easier. And I want to thank you very much, all of you.
Okay. Yeah, and you too for your prep. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay, so one of the things it says is, why did a buyer bring Rabba's explanation of the Brisa regarding Maisani? He could have just said that there's seasonal price fluctuations, right? This is on 7b1. The whole reason that a buyer brought his uncle and his mentor Rabba's explanation was that he wanted to show that that something is not always valued at the current price. It's sometimes also valued at the future price. It's not a blanket rule that it's only valued at the future price, by the way. It's always circumstantial, depends on the incident. But here we chose the analogy of a jersey because the jersey's function is to keep you warm in winter. Therefore, that's true price. And if you're getting it on the summer sale, the future price of what you would buy it for in winter is its actual true price. It's not obviously true for everything, but in this particular case with property, it has to be where the person can get the real price of his value, which is the higher price in this sum. So now we're going on to 7b. Before we go on 7b2, we introduce it with 7b1. So I need you to consider a case where the damage was done in Tishrei, where land prices are depressed. So the damaged party's right is to collect from superior land. This is where we left off. But if he says to the damager, instead of giving me a small amount of superior land as payment, give me a slightly larger amount of average land. What does the damager say to him? He can say, listen, you've got a biblical right to collect superior land. So if you want to take superior land, you can take it at the current depressed price of Tishrei. Because, why are we saying this? Because who's had an advantage here? The damaged party. Why? because he's getting maybe an acre of land for 100 zuz instead of getting half an acre of land, because at the true value of the property, you only get half an acre of land to recover is 100 zuz. But here it takes an acre of land to recover is 100 zuz. But we're saying it's fair because the damager should have watched what he was doing, and then the damaged party can quickly sell the land and not have to wait 6 months in order to recover his money. So the damager says to him, if you want to take superior land, as is your right, fine. But if you want to take average land and higher land, you need to take it at the future price of Nissan, because otherwise I'm sustaining a loss. So the contradiction is resolved.
Sorry, Damon. I think you're trying to. I may be wrong. I thought you were trying to say that if the guy doesn't take superior land in the month of Tishrei, which is his right, then and he wants to take inferior land, surely then the damager will say, well, fine, but you must take the inferior land at the price of Tishrei. Because isn't that what we were trying to say? Oh, sorry.
No. They're two different arguments. Okay, they're two different arguments. The premise is as follows. Let's just get the months right, because you used the wrong month in the sentence, but I know what you were trying to say, and you have a valid point. So, highest prices in Nissan. Why? Because it is at that point where you can reap your, you can reap the agricultural benefits of the land. And in Nissan and Tishrei, it's heading into winter, so the land is dead and fallow for 6 months. Okay. So the higher price is in Nissan and the lower price is in Tishrei. Okay. So what it says on 7b1 is it proposes this introduction to what I've just covered now. So there's one opinion, and the one opinion is if a damaged party says to the damager, listen, instead of giving me superior land, can you give me more average land? Then the damager turns around to the damaged party and says, listen, you've got a biblical enactment to recover your money quickly, according to superior land, at which I owe you. So fine, I will give it to you at the depressed property price where I'm taking the hit. But now if you want to play games and change the story and you want intermediate land, and you want a bit more intermediate land because it's lower quality, I don't want to take that loss. I think you should I think you should take it at the future price, the fair price of Nissan. That's what it's
and take less land. At the future price of Nissan.
Yes, in other words, no, more land, because it's average land. Okay, so let me just say it again. He's entitled to. Yes, we're talking about not a lender here, damager. We haven't introduced the lender here. So the damager, the damaged party can take superior land from the damager because it says the choicest of his field or his vineyard. So I'm the damaged party, and I say to you, listen, what I'm saying, Marco, is as follows, right? Biblically, the damaged party takes from the damager superior land because it says that the damager shall pay his choicest field or vineyard. Fine. So now, as the damaged party, I'm turning around to you, Marco, and say, listen, instead of giving me maybe 3 hectares of superior land, rather give me 4 hectares of average land. Okay. You know what I mean? In other words, just give me a bit more average.
Got it.
Okay, so just give me a bit more average land, and then you turn around to me and say to me, listen, if you want average land, you've got a biblical right to collect superior land. I'm taking a hit at the moment in Tishrei. If you want average quality land and you want to take a bit more, then I want you to pay the real price, the higher price, the future price of Nissan. That's what you're saying to me. Okay? So this is dealing with the case of he shall pay his choices. Remember the word he shall pay. So remember there was a discussion initially with Rav Ulla. Ulla, the son of Rav Eli, turned around and said, he shall pay, meaning if he has to pay against his will, he has to pay with the choicest of land. If he pays voluntarily, he shall return the lost object. He then can pay with bran or anything else, because he hasn't troubled the damaged party to go to court, and he hasn't wasted the time of the court. That was Rav Uller's opinion. Okay? Abaya didn't agree with his interpretation. You remember that? Marco, have I lost you?
Sorry, I'm here. I'm listening. Yeah, got it.
I didn't know if I lost you. So
100%. Sorry.
What I'm saying is the first opinion was Ulla the son of Rav Eliai. And he turned around and said, when it uses the term, he shall pay of his choicest. He took the word he shall pay with the thief. He shall pay double. And from there he comes to learn he shall pay double. Why is he paying the penalty as well as compensation for thievery? Is because the court is forcing him to pay. If he voluntarily turns around to the court and before he comes to court and says to the guy, I did wrong, he only has to pay the compensation for what he took. The other is to return the article, pay the money equivalent. But when it says he shall pay double, because he aggravated the person he stole against and because he wasted the court's time, he then has to pay a penalty in direct proportion to the compensation. So he's paying double the amount he stole. The first part for the compensation, the second part for the penalty. And if he said he shall return, it's taking the case of he's returned the object. He's paying voluntarily. So Rav Ila is turning around and saying, listen, if you're going to waste the court's time and aggravate the damaged party, then you don't have a choice. You're going to pay from your choicest field, superior land, and it's going to whack you. And you know what? If you do this in Tishrei at the wrong time, you're really going to lose. And Rav Abaya didn't like that interpretation, and he said, fine, if you're talking about forcing a person to pay, he would use the word rather has paid. By the way, he didn't like that because Abaya said the term shall be paid implies the damager is forced to pay against his will. Okay, I'm just giving you a summary. So Abaya uses the explanation as the master Rabbah. Rabbah was a Tana. He was a master. And he was also Abaya's uncle and chief mentor. Okay, so he says, no, listen, it has nothing to do with this case. It has to do with the case of if he takes his land as is his right, his superior land as his right with a damager, then he shall pay his choicest comes to imply that. And if he says he shall return, it means that if he wants like medium quality land but a bit more land, he shall return back to the price of Nissan at the true value and pay a little bit more to what the property is actually worth. That was his initial interpretation. That's what the Gemara is coming to put forward. We don't know if that's a buyer's interpretation, but that's what the Gemara wants to propose. That if, for example, that just hang on, let me finish. That if instead of taking superior land, that he wants to take average land, but a bit more, he shall return, means he shall return to the price of the higher future price of Nissan at the price that will prevail in the expensive season. Am I making sense?
So, yes, Abaya was a bit more lenient to the damage, or he helped, he was, he sort of, it was a bit more lenient than because he took into account the future value. And, he wasn't more lenient. It was just a different opinion. The one was talking about voluntary payment versus dragging somebody through the court system. And they say if you want to, and Rav Ila turned around and said, listen, if you want to play games and the person must take you to court and you waste the court's time and you're dragging this thing out, you're paying with the choice land. And you know what, this could end up costing you a lot, because if you do it during the off season, you still have to pay 100 zuz. So now you're paying twice the land instead of paying half the land at the attractive season because you got cute. Instead of actually just coming to the party and saying, I did wrong, I need to pay for the damage. Rav Abaya said he has paid implies that it is forced payment, and he doesn't like the interpretation of the wording. Okay? So he's saying, no, it's saying something different. He shall pay choicest is a biblical enactment that you should pay for land. You should pay with your land, but if you're paying from superior land, the person is getting it in Tishrei
more land at the attractive price so that they convert that land into cash quickly. And if you happen to damage when it's peak season, well, you're paying less land. But the truth of it is you have to pay where the person can recover their costs quickly. But if the damaged party gets a little, I wouldn't say cute, but says, nah, listen, I'd rather take average land and take a bit more average land than smaller superior land, then he shall return to the price of future price of Nissan at the expensive season, because that's the value of the price. So that's how he interprets the word. He shall pay the choicest land, and he shall return to paying the higher true value price of the future price of Nissan. That's his explanation.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Pleasure. So that's where we're at 7B1. Okay, and then we are at 7B2. We are going to have a bit of a challenge with this. I don't know 7B2 at the moment. And the Gemara objects to the initial proposition by the opinion of Rav Abaya. Now, we don't know if it's actually Rav Abaya's opinion or the Gemara proposing that that's Rav Abaya's opinion. Are you with me? Sometimes what happens is the Gemara proposes it's a certain Tana's opinion, and then it's an opinion according to certain of his students. And there's different opinions. Remember when we had with Shmuel, we had on one time Rav Yehuda, and then we had Rava. Do you remember that on Rav Shmuel? Yes. So sometimes we don't know if it's a person's actual opinion or the Gemara proposes that's opinion, but it looks like it is his opinion, by the way. So the Gemara objects because it's bringing an opinion of Rav Acha bar Yaakov, who challenged that explanation. And he had a valid point, and I'll tell you what his point is. So if it's so that the damaged party must accept a higher valuation if he wishes to take other than superior land, then you have weakened the power of damaged parties with respect to collection of average and inferior lands. And this shouldn't be so, for the merciful one stated in the Torah that a damaged party can collect even from superior land, which is obviously intended to his heart's disposition. And you say that he cannot collect from average or inferior land as well, unless he accepts a higher valuation. Why should the damaged party be handicapped in this manner? Now, he says it very eloquently, but I'm not the brightest, sharpest tool in the shed, so I'm going to give it to you in Damon language. Okay? So what is he actually saying is as follows. He's saying, and it's the only simple way I can say, is that, say you damaged me to 100 zuz, guys. Let me just say that, let's just take a case. Gavin, your Reuven, let's not use us as a personal example. Reuven damaged Shimon's ox, okay, and it cost him 100 zuz. Now, Shimon isn't entitled to wait 6 months to recover his money, right? So he was now given the enhanced power of collecting from superior land, and we said the reason he's collecting from superior land so that he can sell that land very quickly because buyers would jump at the quality of the land, and he can convert that land into cash immediately, so he doesn't have to wait 6 months to recover his loss. Now, this has caused the damager money, but he should have been more careful what his ox was doing, and so he takes a loss, and the damaged party takes a bit of a time loss because now he has to sell that property to convert it into cash. So both parties have been inconvenienced. So why it's saying that it doesn't make sense, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, and to me, this point does make sense what Rav Acha bar Yaakov is saying. He's saying, listen, you're only paying superior land, for example, to the value of the damage you cause, right? So if Reuven caused Shimon 100 zuz worth of loss, he's only giving him 100 zuz worth of property, whether it's 100 zuz where he gives him less land in Nissan, we have to give him more land in Tishrei. But the point of it is he only has to cover 100 zuz. Right? So since he only has to cover that damaged amount, what difference would he make if he still gave him 100 zuz worth of average or inferior land? What difference is it going to make? He's only giving him what he damaged anyway. Does that make sense? And it makes sense to me.
Me too. That's the most obvious solution. I agree with that.
Yeah, and he turned around and says, when the Torah said the damaged party can collect even from superior land, it goes without saying that if you can even collect from superior, it's obvious then you can collect from what? Average or inferior, appropriate to what that land is worth. And obviously superior, say for example, superior quality land, you'd have to collect an acre, right, to pay for the damage. And average land, you'd have to collect 2 acres to recover that 100 zuz damage. And inferior land, 3 acres. You're not taking more land because the land is only worth 100 zuz. You're taking commensurate to what damage you caused. So he doesn't understand what the problem is with Rav Abaya.
But he's talking about in the present value. He's not talking about...
Marco, you're confusing it. It's not about the value. Whatever the value is, you're either in a good position or bad as a damager.
Okay.
So if you happen to damage, just let me finish a sec. If you damage in a point where the property prices are at its normal value of Nissan, what the property should be worth, you scored as the damager because you're getting away with the land being worth a lot and you can end up paying with less land. If you happen to damage in a bad time, you're having to give more land, but you're still paying the same financial equivalent. So I don't want you to get distracted by the land price. What Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is saying is it doesn't matter what period of time you're damaged at. You're only paying 100 zuz worth of damage. So the guy that damaged you is either out of luck because he happened to damage in Tishrei, or he's in luck because he happened to damage in Nissan. But whether you take average or inferior quality land, as well as superior, doesn't make a difference because you're only collecting 100 zuz worth of land. So obviously at the depressed price, you're collecting much more land anyway than you would at the Nissan price, commensurate to that value. But he's saying that the damager is not getting him worse off by giving average or inferior land. He's got no right to demand it at the Nissan price. He doesn't agree with the buyer.
Saying the same thing. I agree. It's fine. Cool.
Yeah, but do you understand why it doesn't? And to me, it makes sense what Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is saying. He's saying that the damager is not losing. I mean, he's lost because his timing was off. But if you're giving average land, so you give a bit more, and if you're doing inferior, you give even more, or superior even less. But the thing of it is, it's a non-issue. But there is a caveat to this. What's the caveat? Is that firstly, you can't, as the damaged party, demand a particular parcel of land. Because the damager has a right to hold it from collection, providing he can satisfy the legal requirements. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Yeah, in other words, he's saying you don't have to demand this. My view is that you need to recover the cash. This land is important to me because my kids grew up on this land. It has a sentimental value. You can't demand this land if I've got other land to give you. That will give you your 100 zuz. So you can't accept this. And they're saying even more. According to the Rosh, even Rav Acha doesn't disagree with a buyer who says if the Rosh says that Rav Acha agrees with the buyer that if the damager is not prepared to give up anything other than superior land, and he has superior land, the damaged party can't insist he take average or inferior. He can't force him. The only thing of that is if the damager agrees, he can't sell it to him at the higher price of Nissan. So both Rav Acha and the buyer agree with each other on that note. Does that make sense?
Good, Dan.
Yeah, to me, good.
Okay. So in other words, they do agree. Now, so the Gemara then maintains, well, it doesn't kind of make sense here because we're stuck at a stone-walled position. The Gemara maintains that the damaged party cannot be forced to accept a higher valuation, and hence this distinction cannot be used to resolve the contradiction posed by a buyer. So it goes off on a bit of a tangent, but not too long. And it says the Gemara notes that there is a scenario where one collecting what is owed is indeed forced to accept a higher valuation, and it's going to refute it now. So this is when it goes to the case of a lender, guys, and not a damaged party. So Rav Acha Bar Yaakov said, if there is a situation to where Rav as a distinction can be compared, it can be compared to the case of a lender collecting a debt during Tishrei. For a lender's right is to collect from average land. But if he says to the debtor, instead of giving me a small amount of average land, give me a slightly larger amount of inferior land, the debtor can reply to him, if you take average land as is your right, take it at the current depressed price of Tishrei. But if you do not wish to take average land, but instead take inferior land, you must take it at the higher future price. In this case, Rava's distinction indeed has application. Okay, so it seems here that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is agreeing with the buyer's view of Rabba, that when we're talking about a lender, okay, not a damager, that he's entitled to average quality land. So he has to repay back the loan, okay, that he took money for. So if he repays back the loan and says, listen, instead of me giving you average land, I want to give you more inferior land to pay back the debt. The other party can turn around and say, listen, I would rather get it at the higher value. Does that make sense? You can't take it at the current value because your right is to collect from average land. Your right is not to collect from inferior land. So if you want to make sure that you take inferior land and more, you have to pay at the full price. Does that make sense, guys?
Not 100%, because I don't really see the difference between a creditor and a damager. I mean, it's pretty much the same principle. If you damage 100 or you owe the creditor 100, what's the difference? As long as the guy gets his 100.
Okay. So what we're going to see is, firstly, Gavin, I agree with you, but there is an opinion to support it. Okay. So, and the opinion to support it is as follows, is that biblically, okay, you are allowed to pay back a debt with inferior quality land. That's according to biblical enactment. According to the Torah enhanced the rights of the borrower to say that he can pay back in terms of average quality land. Okay, so there's a difference between the rabbinic upgrading and the biblical right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
And this doesn't occur in a case of a damager.
Yeah, that is a distinction, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the slight distinction. For it's a lender's right to collect from average land. Okay? So if he's getting the money back from the debtor and said, listen, I lent it to you, you can give me back the loan, but I'd rather have average land. The person that he borrowed money to can't turn around and say, listen, if you take inferior land, you must take it at the higher Nissan price. Okay? So the reason that this case can be brought is there's a slight difference in terms of biblical enactment versus rabbinic decree. But the problem is that this application is challenged. Why is it challenged? Because Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, challenged the ruling for a particular reason. He's saying, firstly, there's a couple of things you've got to bear in mind. If you're forcing a lender to accept a higher valuation, if he wishes to take inferior land, you will have in fact locked the door in the face of prospective borrowers. For the lender will retort to the debtor, if you will still have your money that I lent you, had I never lent you the money in the first place, I would be able to purchase inferior land at the current lower price. Now that the money is in your possession, you tell me that I must take the inferior land at the future higher price. So let me just tell you what the grappling is here. Firstly, why did the Torah go from giving paying back the land from inferior to average? Marco?
From inferior to average, not the other way around. Sorry.
No, I'm saying, all right. So, Arthur, I'm going to ask you a question in a minute or two.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is as follows. According to the Torah, I'm lending you money to buy. I don't want to use the term loan. Let me tell you why I don't, because it's confusing. Debt or credit or debt, plaintiff, defendant, court cases. Let's just use simple language. You need to buy a property, okay? So what I'm doing is, and you want to farm in that property. A person is poor. I'm lending you 100 zuz to buy your particular property, right? So the land is mortgaged to me. You owe me that money back. You can pay me that back at no interest, but that land belongs to me. Okay. So what I'm saying is you decide to pay me back, or let's just say I lend you money for a car. And I say, well, what do you have in terms of collateral? And you say to me, well, you've got like different parcels of land. According to the Torah strictly, what can the person that owes money pay back with?
Average land.
No, inferior quality land.
Is that? But this is you're not saying this is a loan. This is a debt. This is a loan. This is a.
No, I understand that, Michael. But what we did learn before is that the biblical enactment is that you're dealing with a poor person here. So according to the Torah, straightforwardly, the person's not going to have a lot of land. He's probably going to have inferior quality land. He's not going to have much, because if he had much, he wouldn't be borrowing, would he?
Yeah.
Not really. Yeah. So according to the Torah, the poor person can pay back with like whatever he has, as long as he pays back his debt at no interest. So according to the Torah, that's fine. You can pay back with inferior quality land. So, but what's the problem with that? Why would you lend a poor person money? Because now you're getting a property in the Cape Flats, and there are gang wars and people are shooting bullets at each other. Tell me something. How quickly do you think you're going to get your money back?
Not at all.
And you won't get it quickly.
No, it's going to deter. I think I remember this. Sorry, the reason why they increased it from inferior land to intermediary land is to protect future loans. Otherwise, the creditors won't give out loans because there's nothing in it for them.
Gavin is 100% correct. It's not to protect. The right word, Gavin's concept is totally correct, is it wants to basically encourage people to lend to the poor.
Sorry, my English is not so good. Yeah.
No, but your concept was dead on. So what it's saying is, listen, unless somebody's phoning the suicide hotline and you've got that database of people phoning in, they're not going to buy any property in the Cape Flats. Okay?
Yeah.
So the thing of it is now you've got a problem because you've got poor people that are not going to be lent any money. So what we're saying is that what was the first definition of a poor person is that they're not meeting their current expenses, which is most of us. If you're not covering your expenses, you're poor. You could be earning 50 or 100 grand a month. It doesn't matter if your expenses are 150 and you've got a couple of kids at King David and you've got Discovery Medical Aid that you're paying for. You're not meeting your expenses. So
I'll be honest, it's hard to tell, but it looked like you were looking directly at me, but it's hard to tell.
Gavin, I'm not seeing anybody but the Aramaic, so I promise you I wasn't looking at you.
Well, I've got descendants that are Aramaic.
At least your kids are grown up. You know, a lot of the people in this group, their children, they still got to pay for their school fees. So that's a win for you. So let's get back. So
God bless you guys. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
So what I was going to say is the reality is people in that definition of poor have other land. They've got property in Sydenham or Glen Hazel or near Balfour Park or whatever they've got. You know what I'm saying? So there, it's not considered inferior land. It's not the Cape Flats, and call it average land. So what the Gemara is saying is that person needs to pay back the debt. So they're either going to pay back the debt in cash or they're going to put a mortgage on their property to be able to offer some sort of collateral. And the reason why it has to be like that is because they wanted to enhance the borrower's power. so that a person will lend them money. Does that make sense? So this is where this argument is coming from Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, where he said there is a situation where Rava's distinction can be compared. Because there's not a case in the case of a damage and a damaged part. It's clear, it's superior land, then there's this whole issue, well, what if I pay 100 zuz worth of average or inferior? But we're saying here, well, what a case where there's a biblical enactment of land where you can actually collect from inferior land. Why should you be able to take it at the higher price, according to his opinion? So his opinion is, listen, it is fair because you're dealing with a poor person here. So when you're getting the money back, you're actually damaging the poor person even further. Why are you damaging them further? Because now you're asking them to pay you back with land from inferior quality land at the depressed price. So on the one hand, you've helped them. On the other hand, you've hurt them. Does that make sense? It does have application, according to Rava's distinction. I just want you to understand the argument.
Okay.
So I'm saying, what was the goal here of lending at no profit? We don't charge interest dues to other Jews. So it's saying here that if you're going to say that you want to take more inferior quality land, but you want to take it at the discounted price, you're actually going to damage this poor person. So the poorer person is losing money by having to give it to you off season. So he's saying, can you give it to me at the normal price? It's got a point. Guy's poor. Okay. So then this application is challenged because we said, well, why did we upgrade? This is very important, very important. And who brought this challenge? There's two Rav Achas. There's Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, and the person that's challenging now him is Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ikka. And he's saying, listen, we understand why you want the poor person to take it at the future normal high price, because that is the value, because you don't want to damage the poor person. You don't want them to have to now sell it off season at a loss. But he's saying what you're actually going to do is you're going to create damage. What sort of damage are you going to cause? You're actually going to make sure that the person's going to be very, very upset to lend you money. Because the guy's going to say I'm going to say to this other person, I lent you money, you were in a tight spot. Now you're turning around to me when I need the money back, and you've got the extra money, and you're saying to me, no, but I must take it at the highest value of the property price in Nissan. And I'm turning around to you and say, listen, you took my cash. If I had my cash now and I hadn't lent it to you, I would be able to buy at the discounted rate where the property prices are low. You've actually hurt me. You're trying now, I've given you money to empower you, and now I don't have the cash flow because I've lent it to you. But if I had the cash flow and I hadn't lent to you, I could buy whatever property I want. Now you're telling me I must pay it at the higher price. Why must I lend you money? So what you're actually doing here is you're damaging the power of the borrower. This is not about the power of the creditor. It's about the power of the borrower, not the lender. Does that make sense, guys? That's what the Gemara is worried about. It's not to enhance the power of the creditor to be able to take back more land or anything. It's in fact to stop people from that. Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ikka, and Rav Acha Bar Yaakov are actually on the same page in one respect. They want to make sure poor people get loans. So on the one hand, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov turns around and says, listen, the person's poor. If he wants to pay, if the person that he owes money to wants a bit more inferior land than average land, the person that's poor can sell it to him at the higher future price, because the person that's poor is taking a bit of a knock by selling it at the Tishrei price instead of the Nissan price. And Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ikka, doesn't agree. He said, listen, if you really want to help the poor people, you don't want to lock the door in the face of prospective borrowers, because a rich person will say, listen, if I give you my cash flow, it means I can't, then I have to pay now the highest price when you want to pay me back. And I can't use the cash flow I would have lent you to buy at the discounted rate where everybody else can buy, because you got my cash. I try to help you, now you're hurting me. Do you get what I'm saying? They're both on the same side. They just don't agree in terms of approach.
Yeah, and it also doesn't make a lot of sense, because even if a borrower now has been elevated to be able to take intermediary land. So if he takes intermediary land, it's going to be at the discounted price anyway. So what's the difference if he was entitled originally to inferior land? So it should still be at the discounted price. It makes no sense that all of a sudden, because he's taking inferior land, that it's elevated to the Nissan price. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
To me.
No,
I know these guys are strong oaks, and it's hard to fight them, but that's just my opinion.
So what they're saying is that their approach is to make sure that the borrower can get money, so that the borrower can pay back the creditor, and it's got to be in a system that's also fair to the person that's lending him money. Firstly, the person that's lending money is not getting any interest; he's not gaining. So that's something that you've got to bear in mind. Now, why did they push him, Marco? Do you remember this in Gittin number 40, right? In 39 and 40 and 38, when it said, why didn't they jack up his power, the borrower, to superior land? Do you remember, Marco? Kevin, do you remember?
Say again.
He was only allowed to collect the lender to the borrower was only allowed to initially biblically collect from inferior land, and then they upgraded the lender to collect from the borrower to average quality land. Why didn't they upgrade it further to high quality land, superior land? What I'm saying is that you can't collect from superior land, because then what will happen is people will lend other people money. They will hope they will default on their payment, and they will take advantage of the situation, and they will do it just in order to make sure the person gets into debt and lose the land that the other person had his eye on. So he involves him by lending him money, knows he can't pay him back, and then loan sharkingly takes back the superior property, and that's why I lent him money.
Yes, okay. Good answer. I do remember that. I forgot. Thank you. Thank you. Nice answer. Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, good. All right, guys, we can end off on this note.
Okay,
right,
mate.
great, guys. See you tomorrow. Thank you so much.